have the ferocious powerhouse, the marketing expert. Well, maybe not an expert, but you're doing a pretty phenomenal job on LinkedIn. This is Yonah Weiss. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to talk to you about marketing, capital raising, and cost segregation. So thanks for coming on.
Awesome.
How are you doing
Thank you.
today?
Thank you so much for having me, Ruben. This is it's my pleasure. I'm just happy. I love watching, you through my LinkedIn feed almost every other day with your podcast. Awesome guests, really valuable content and snippets that you're putting out there. So congratulations on the new podcast, and keep pumping it out.
Yeah, man, it's fun. I love the podcasting world. I love connecting with the people and learning about all aspects, multifamily syndication. I'm new to this arena. Multifamily, I've invested, but the specific style of capital raise and everything about the syndication and the powerhouse teams that are involved in it, it's all a new world for me. So this podcasting has been a great avenue. And I understand that you're working on a podcast with Bobby Sharma.
So, Bobby Sharma is, he's in his own right a legend in the San Francisco Bay Area in the real estate world. He runs a number of very popular meetups out there, and so we launched together the Higher Profits with Bobby and Yonah, and we just launched. We don't really have anything up except for the YouTube channel so far, but we're getting there.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I just launched my podcast as a result of being brought in with my syndication company. That was the very first thing I did. And I've heard from a few people that you really want to get a bunch of things in place and have your systems dialed in before you launch a podcast. But for somebody like me, if I wait until everything is perfect, then I end up suffering from paralysis analysis, or whatever that's called. And I don't move forward. So for me, just taking the action and then creating the systems and getting all of that dialed in was more important for me to just launch in. And so we got to put together a website and a lead capture system. So I understand where you're at. YouTube channel is a great place. You can start broadcasting on one of the hosting platforms, so you can get on iTunes and SoundCloud and Stitcher and Spotify and everywhere else. That would probably be a good spot. But yeah, you definitely, I hear from Michael Blank, want to create a lead capture system. And your business, let's go a little bit into your business. It's Madison Specs, right? So this is a corporation that has done, I believe, 15,000 cost segregation studies across the nation. Typically, what assets are you analyzing?
So we're doing, like you mentioned, 15,000 and counting. We do about 2,000 a year, and we're growing. So in every asset class. So whether it's multifamily, office, retail, self-storage, mobile home parks, industrial, you name it, any type of property, whether it's a business property or an investment property, can benefit from cost segregation. So we are working on, those properties across the nation.
So for a multifamily syndicator, one of the things that I thought was an interesting twist, right? So the way that we get investors is by proving to them that we can improve the net operating income on a property. So typically we do that by reducing the expenses, getting better management in place, stabilizing the property, increasing the rents, improving the physical attributes of the property. Mm-hmm. But there's a couple other things that we can do to increase the NOI. And one thing that you're very good at and your company is very good at, which is cost segregation. So this process of lowering the taxes, or I don't even know exactly what cost segregation is, but you basically do a study. I'll let you take over and talk about it to increase the NOI, which is attractive to investors when you're looking to raise capital.
Absolutely. And cost segregation is, not some like magic, fairy sprinkle, right? Fairy dust on your property. It's an IRS, dictated method of depreciating the property. So every property depreciates. Now that doesn't mean that it actually goes down in value like it sounds. It's really a borrowed term. Depreciation means something's going down in value. In tax terminology, the IRS gives a tax deduction income tax deduction based on the principle that things go down in value as time goes on. And they separated this out into different lives, so different asset lives. Usually people who don't know what cost segregation is or are not using cost seg will just shorten it to cost seg because that's cool. And it's harder to, less of a tongue twister.
Yeah.
Most people are doing this straight line, which means they're taking the purchase price of the property, subtracting a certain amount for land allocation, which land does not depreciate, but the building and the improvements on the building do. And we're allowed to write off the entire value of that building over a certain number of years. So for multifamily, it's 27.5 years. For commercial, it's 39 years. So multifamily or any residential, 27.5. Commercial, anything else besides that, hotels, you name it, 39 years, which means you take that value, divide it by 39, you get that amount of write-off on your taxes, lowering your income tax from that NOI. You further lower what you have to pay on that NOI. That's what depreciation is. But cost segregation actually brings it further and breaks out, segregates out, if you will, with this weird name, right? We're segregating the cost into different lives, different categories. So you have personal property, stuff that's in the building is not really part of the structure, which depreciates, meaning it actually goes down in value much faster, okay, over a 5-year period. So the IRS gave this number. It said all personal property, which includes appliances, furniture, cabinets, shelving, carpeting, anything that's not literally part of the main structure, so fixtures and special purpose lighting and all kinds of stuff, all depreciates over 5 years, meaning you can take that entire value and write that off over a 5-year period. That's, in a nutshell, what cost segregation is.
So the very first time I heard your name, it was actually Zach Haptenstall here in Phoenix, Arizona. I think was shooting a little video, and he mentioned that he sought you out to come do a cost segregation study on his, I believe it's Via Serena apartment complex that he just recently purchased in the syndication. Can you walk us through that deal and what you did or how that study went, or talk to us about how you go and do a cost segregation study on an apartment complex for a multifamily syndication group?
Absolutely. It's a pretty straightforward process. The first thing that we do for everyone is provide an upfront analysis for free to show you like what the potential tax benefits, the tax savings would be, doing a cost segregation and getting those accelerated depreciation deductions versus if you were to just do a straight line. What's called the normal method, which is actually wrong because it's actually considered by the IRS the improper method. But everyone's doing it, so it's normal. So we show you that, then we'll send an engineer to the property to walk the property, take pictures, measurements of everything. Okay, so they're going to walk the entire property, the parking lot, all the swimming pool, everything, the landscaping, all of that stuff depreciates over a faster life. All that over a 15-year period, and they'll go into the units, a number of units, every type of layout they'll have to go into, get literally a very detailed report is now made based on all of those findings, which breaks down every single detail of everything that's in the property. We have engineers in-house that do this. They'll come to the property, take accounting of everything, and then come back and tally up, make the calculations. There's, 45,000 square feet of carpeting. Right? There's, 200 cabinets, right? Whatever it is. And they'll take all of those measurements, all the industry standard, values, or, in certain cases based on the market values of certain products, certain values to things, make that calculation and then create an updated depreciation schedule. So it's very little involved in the actual, the syndicator or the owner's time. It really is just preparing this report, which takes a lot of time on our part, but very little time from the investor or from the owner's part.
So let me ask you this. When people purchase a property in a syndication, there's typically a group of investors who the money is raised from. They're called limited partners, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's the general partners. So this cost segregation and the depreciation on the property affects both of those people, right? The investors and the general partners. Is that correct? Is that your understanding?
Correct. Well, in different ways, but yes, correct. It will affect them because it's going to affect the income tax deduction. And every person who is involved in that partnership, to whatever extent they are involved, will have usually, there are different ways to divide this up in the operating agreement, who owns, the property to what amount, but generally speaking, everyone owns a certain amount of shares in that property through the LLC that's invested in the property. Again, there are many different ways of structuring this. Just speaking of one, a very common way of doing things. If, the LP, the limited partners will have a certain percentage of ownership. According to their percentage of ownership, they will get that exact percentage of depreciation deductions. Okay. Well, that's in every case. Okay. Whether you're doing cost segregation or not, that will flow through and show up on their K1, which is a tax form, which shows what your, gains and losses from this passive investment or from this, because property is considered passive income according to the IRS. It's not active income. It has a whole different reporting to it. So all that income is going to show up and it's going to show the deductions. How much is going to be deducted, and according to your percentage of ownership, that's how much deduction you can have. If we're doing a lot more deductions, so that's going to end up passing through to everyone, that greater amount, which for limited partners is not going to be as beneficial, because what's going to happen to them, it's going to just create a passive loss. What will happen in most cases, if they have X amount of income, $10,000 of income from the property and $10,000 of deductions from the depreciation, they will have, all of their income will be tax-free income. Okay. But if they have $20,000 of deductions on that $10,000 income, in most cases, they won't be able to benefit from the extra 10,000. It will create what's called a passive loss, and it will create a negative, which is not a bad thing. It will carry forward with, meaning you can use that in future years, but it will not benefit you to then go ahead and offset other income. If you're making other income from, let's say you're a W-2 or what have you, it's only going to benefit the income produced from the property itself or other properties, other passive income. So it can be used to offset other passive income across the board.
And then what do you think, it's kind of a loaded question, but how long do you think you need to be in a deal for cost segregation to have a benefit? Is it, 2 years, 5 years? At what point is there, if you're just going in there and flipping a property, a multifamily apartment complex in 18 months, does it make sense to do a cost segregation at that point?
That's a great question. I'm going to answer, the best answer that's out there, which is it depends. Usually, over 2 years of ownership is where the real benefit is going to come in. Between 2 and 10 years, that's where you're going to get the maximum benefit from this. However, it depends, because it depends what your overall strategy is. Okay, cost segregation is creating, front-loading income tax deductions, and what that does is increases your cash flow. It increases your cash flow, which allows you to then have more money to reinvest. If you're holding a property for under a year and your intention upon purchase was just to flip it, then you're probably not going to benefit from cost segregation at all. However, if it's more than a year and you're planning on flipping it, there are some considerations. I have seen some people do it because they just want to pull out as much of their own money this year, and they'll deal with next year. And some people have that strategy. Again, everyone has to create their own tax strategy with their accountant, but it can be done. But again, between 2 and 10 years, that's where the maximum is going to be.
Awesome. So then what kind of an effect on the bottom line does it really have? Does the cost segregation have?
Generally speaking, in the first 5 years, we are, in most cases, the income being produced from the property is going to be tax-free. Okay. Which translates to the real bottom line, the real cash flow, your IRR. Because if you're looking at, an IRR based on cash flow and how much that cash can now be used to reinvest, right? That's really what you're looking at. You're looking at the bottom line, not just the NOI. You get that money, but now you have to go and pay taxes on that. That's not a real return. I mean, it is, but if you factor in the fact that it's tax-free money, in most cases, then that actually creates a greater IRR. So there's no real number to it. But again, if you just factor in the fact that if you're going to be paying a 39% income tax rate, or for example, then there's probably close to a 20 to 25% extra increase in the return because of this.
Interesting. I've actually had some guests on my show that have brought you up. When we're talking about marketing and getting in front of people, like Logan Freeman, who was on my show yesterday, he actually mentioned that, for example, if you say cost segregation, who's the guy? And he asked me, he's like, who's the first person that you think of? And I'm like, Yonah. He's like, yeah, you've never even met him, right? I'm like, no, but I'm going to get him on my show, hopefully down the road. But so what is it? What are you doing that's so effective on LinkedIn? And tell me about your specific marketing strategy, because everybody knows you to be the guy, right? When it comes to cost seg.
Right. I think that's true. It has a lot to do with, a real method of giving. And marketing, a lot of people in business are, thinking about, what am I going to get out of this? Okay, how am I going to gain? What's my return on investment? But if you have a paradigm shift, which is that you are actually going to get back 10 times more if you don't even think about yourself, if you're thinking about how can I add value to others, and you're doing that consistently, literally altruistically, you're really meaning it and doing it. And again, it's a paradigm shift. It's not something that you can do and something necessarily you can teach, but it is something that can be learned and should be done, because that's the practice. People, especially when you're talking about sales in any industry whatsoever, LinkedIn is a place nowadays, and Gary Vee, for example, who's a huge marketer, Gary Vaynerchuk, who talks about this all the time, it's totally under leveraged right now, which means you can get free exposure. Okay, we're not talking about paid advertising. We're not talking about, Facebook ads. We're not talking about Google ads. We're talking about free exposure, personal branding, just by adding value, okay? And so you do this by building a network. And, it's talked about LinkedIn is like a networking, right? It's like about networking and your connections and who do you know, and you're connected to so-and-so. And it's totally different now than it was, 2 years ago, 10 years ago. It used to be just a place where you put your, resume, a place where you get a job, you look for a job, HR people, recruiters are on there all day long looking for people. It has a totally different social networking experience that has been created over the past 2 years or so, basically, is when it shifted. And not a lot of people are utilizing it, which means if you have a niche of any kind, you can now just be putting yourself in front of the world by not only producing content and adding value, but seeing how you can add value to other people's content. And that's probably more important than putting out your own, tooting your own horn, putting out your own stuff, just helping other people, adding value, not thinking, how am I going to sell? How am I going to try to get sales, etc. That's not the approach. So the approach is really networking, business, getting to know people and helping promote, other people, adding value. That's how you do it.
Yeah, I think when I first started my podcast, it was a little different because I was so focused on how am I going to sound, and am I going to have, questions prepared, and will I look good? Am I going to represent my company in a good way, or am I just going to sound stupid? And when I just let go of all of that and stopped really trying to talk about myself and just started focusing in on the person that I had on my show, it made for such an easier conversation, and it allowed me to flow in a much different way. So it's been a process for me. But the podcasting world, it's kind of like your own personal Toastmasters.
Yeah.
Even something like connecting with the screen and connecting with your people and having an extra level of confidence in the way that you approach your interviews with people has been a completely different experience than I had expected. I didn't realize that I was going to get personal development and speaking development from starting this podcast. I just really wanted a broadcast, and now I'm seeing all these amazing effects from it. So I
Wow,
commend
that's
you for
amazing.
starting your own show. Tell us, why don't we go down into that path a little bit? Tell us about your
Sure.
show, what your plans are for it, what kind of content you want to provide.
It's interesting. Bobby and I mean, Bobby is an incredible person, and we kind of collaborated together with it kind of springboarded from his own meetups that he does in the Bay Area. Like I mentioned, he has, I don't even know how many, 5, 6 different meetups that meet on a monthly basis across the Bay Area, thousands of people that are regularly coming to his events. And his whole focus is about how can I provide the same kind of idea. How can I provide value? No sales pitches, no one putting any products. I mean, he has done like boot camps where there have been, outside of his meetups to promote, a certain thing, to teach people something that will be a sales type thing. But in general, we want to interview people who have not been on podcasts that much. We want to interview people who just have real world knowledge in their specific, niche or their specific industry, the specific aspect of real estate, so they can share with other people. We're not looking for every person that has been on, like people like me that have been on every single podcast that's out there. And in many cases, they're kind of pushing their own product. They're trying to push their own sales. It just doesn't interest. I think we want to make a little bit of a disruption in that space because there are so many people out there with these podcasts. We want to try to change that up to do something a little bit different.
How many podcasts have you been on?
Actually, I lost count, but over 50.
You've been on over 50. So tell us about some of the favorite interviews that you've had and how you may take some of those concepts and apply to your own show.
I think, all the interviews have been memorable. Every single one, each one in its own right. And I think, the most memorable ones by far, first of all, are with Adam Adams out of AAA. That was the first podcast I was ever on. Literally, he contacted me. He wanted someone to come to congregation. I was like really nervous. I came out like he gave me some feedback. I came out like being like salesy and a little bit pushy and stuff like that. And he's just like, that's not how you do it. I was totally grateful to him for pointing that out to me. Since then, I totally changed what I was doing, but that kind of opened me up. And from there, like went to Joe Fairless and like all these others, just started doing podcasts. Another one that really was an amazing experience was I did one with Tyler Chesson out of Louisville.
I've met Tyler. He's a great guy.
Amazing guy. We did something. I mean, his podcast is not real estate related. It's not. So it was totally different. He interviewed me and asked me all kinds of questions about, my life and about my experience and about, personal development and all kinds of stuff like that, which was totally different from what I'm used to. Was a little bit uncomfortable also, but it was definitely memorable.
I love personal development. I bring that up sometimes. I had a couple conversations about mindset and personal development, even from a spiritual side.
Right.
Try not to go too far into religion most of the time or politics. But where are some of the places that you have been trained in personal development? Tell me about that. You have a background in that. Is it uncomfortable to talk about?
No, but it's different probably from what most of your listeners have heard of, because I'm, Orthodox, Jewish Hasidic person. I was trained in Israel. I spent about 15 years living in Jerusalem in what's called the yeshiva. Yeshiva or kollel, it's a type of basically full-time personal development, like literally nonstop, because it's studying and teaching, but also learning not just about studying from a book like in college or university or other type of academia. This type of knowledge, and it's really the Torah, which is we think of the book of God, and also it's principles of life. It's how we can actually live as a person who's totally connected with the world around them and totally connected with the spiritual world and metaphysical as well. So it's extremely enlightening because it's a constant personal development. I can't, it's kind of hard to describe in great detail, but happy to discuss further with anyone who's interested, because
No,
it's
yeah,
totally life
talk
changing.
about it. I love talking personal development. I've gone through a personal development course through PSI seminars, which is kind of like an awakening, and then an experience, and then a leadership, and then some other things, including a 90-day goal setting workshop. So these have dramatically affected the way that I have developed as a human being. I think a lot of men in general are very afraid to be vulnerable or express themselves from every aspect because society has a specific image. But when you
Right.
connect with people and say, hey, these are the areas where I lack, or the things where I'm growing, and really approach it from a genuine, authentic person standpoint, then it really helps you come across in a different light that most people aren't used to. And they may even consider it a sign of weakness, where somebody like myself will consider it a sign of strength. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So that's been
Absolutely.
a great, I love listening to Wayne Dyer. He's been fantastic. I love Bob Proctor and Wallace Waddles and Napoleon Hill type products. And specifically where I want to go with this, and I'm not sure if in your studies you have contemplated or studied about autosuggestion, or the concept of training your brain to believe something and manifesting it through a process of being grateful for it as if you already have it before you actually have it. Do you have any insight into that, or anything that you want to add?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't in the language that you're describing it, not specifically, but the concept is definitely true. I totally believe that. Focusing, kind of helping to create your reality. And, whether it's, I have a very vast secular education as well, the concepts through Think and Grow Rich, that whole mindset of, focusing on where you want to be, and focusing on, how to get there, and basically creating your reality. And I truly believe that's possible. It obviously takes a great amount of proactive cognitive strength and effort, but definitely is possible and attainable.
Very cool. Now, in regards to the education kind of adding value mindset, where because we're doing the same thing, we're trying some new marketing techniques, and we want to create an educational platform where people
Mhm.
can give us feedback about what kind of information they require and what they want to learn about us and syndication. But you, in being in the cost seg space, what kind of educational content and value are you looking to provide? Is it all business stuff, or are there other areas that you're integrating into this concept as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much at this point, business, because I'm trying, because of this specific service. It's really, I've found that most people aren't taking advantage of this because they just don't know what it is. And so I have that, it's similar in your space, in that multifamily investing, for example, you may be approaching people who are in Wall Street, who are in all kinds of, may understand or be invested in Wall Street, have the understanding that you have to have, some sort of investment of your funds, whatever your income, whatever your savings, whatever that is. But it may be a totally paradigm shift for them, a mindset change, that you can do the same thing and even greater through real estate investing. So there's a lot of education that. So too with the same concept with cost segregation. This is very specific, like weird kind of tax saving strategy, but so few people are really taking advantage of it. So I'm finding like the best way to broadcast that message is through an education type method. So whether it's, being on podcasts like this, whether it's just putting out content, whether it's doing webinars, and I've done, dozens of webinars, whether through my own platform or through other people's platforms, Neil Bawa's Multifamily U, we did through that. We did through, Vinny Chopra's group, and, a lot of other, these groups that they have kind of, I think that's a great platform as well. When you can reach out to a mastermind group or a coaching group where their whole goal is to grow and is to educate themselves. That if you can tap into that, that will, kind of give you an audience that's already completely receptive and much more powerful.
Why is it that everybody knows you on LinkedIn? What are you
Um,
doing?
I'm very active. It's pretty crazy. It's learning the system. It's really just kind of learning the system, and it's a game in a lot of ways. If you learn the system, understand the algorithm, understand what works, what doesn't work, and understand this fact, which is so incredibly true, that the more you give and the more you provide value to others, truly, meaningfully, you'll get back 10 times more. So I'm commenting on other people's posts 10 times more, 20 times more than I'm posting my own content. And that provides value to them. And because the algorithm recognizes comments more than it does posts, so when you look through your feed, if you look at the top of your feed, your home feed, it will say so-and-so commented on this. And you'll see a post, not because the poster put it on there, it was your first connection, because someone who's your first connection commented there. And 50 to 60% of the posts that you're seeing are because others in your network commented or liked it, not because the person who posted it.
I've noticed that.
Understanding that shows you that the more you're active on other people's posts, then your network will see you.
Fascinating. Yeah, I got to practice a little bit more of that. But I love LinkedIn. It's like my new Facebook. I used to spend all my time on Facebook
It is
and
awesome.
Instagram, and now it's like my wife will be like, "Did you see my post on Facebook?" And I'm like, "I haven't been on Facebook in like 3 days," and I'm like, I need to. How do I blend? There's that other question too: is how do you blend and where do you post business stuff?
Right.
Is it appropriate to do so in Facebook or Instagram, and vice versa? If you're on LinkedIn, some of the posts that I see get the most traction are the ones that have some kind of personal touch to it that don't really even talk about business.
Right.
So I find that an interesting, tricky, and yet fun balance of trying to figure out where to post things and how much personal and how much business do you go into doing that. So, but we'll keep on practicing. I heard yesterday or on a previous podcast that I've not published yet that there's some tools on LinkedIn. Like there's a microphone tool that you can record something and send it directly to a message. I recently found out that you can actually take someone's phone and then click on a little box and then it pulls up a scanner that you can yourself scan and it automatically connects to you. So there's all these really cool things that I've never seen on other social media platforms. I guess there's some of that in the messenger, right?
Yeah, that's true. But these are all, obviously all the things you're talking about are on the app, not on the desktop, just if anyone's listening out there and they're trying to looking for the microphone. But yeah, you can send voice messages, you can send video messages through LinkedIn. And another great tool that the app has, which I find incredible for networking, especially if you're doing like a networking group type of experience. If you go to your network, my network at the top on the app, there's a place where it says find nearby.
Mm-hmm. I just learned that too.
Yeah. So if you turn that on, then anyone else who also turned that on, it will show you who is close to you literally in a close proximity, which, is so incredibly amazing that you can just walk around and be like, hey, that's you. Like just connect to people in real life through their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, it'd be great if when you're at a big conference or something, if somebody announced that everybody turned this particular feature on so you guys can connect with each other. Another thing too, I'm not sure if you've been to any conferences where they use the Wova app or an app where you can connect with the entire audience. That's a very powerful tool as well. Although like when you go to a big conference with 600 people, it's just like, woo, how am I going to get through and connect with all these people? I guess you do the best that you can. But social media is a phenomenal tool. So tell us about how big do you want to get in this? Do you want to eventually grow your own cost segregation? Are you investing in multifamily yourself? I know you mentioned earlier that you really love real estate and wanted to educate yourself in every aspect about it. So tell us about what you have for a vision of what you want to complete over the next maybe
Yeah,
10 years?
it's interesting. I don't tend to look too far in advance in terms of those kind of things, in terms of goals, because I like to keep my goals within sight. With that being said, I'm really interested at this point in getting into multifamily investing. So partnering with, in the process of partnering with a couple of my own clients, because I see what they're doing, and I'm just like totally impressed with, you know, the returns they're getting for their investors. And a lot of people have also approached me, you know, friends and family, that, you know, that they see me very much deeply involved in the real estate world. And they're like, hey, are you investing also? I'm like, maybe it's an opportunity to raise capital from them, to kind of pivot in that direction. Since I'm so deeply involved in the real estate world, it should be, you know, pretty relatively easy, you know, more so than, obviously not easy, but relatively so for someone who's not yet even involved in that community, to kind of make that pivot. So that's what I'm working on.
Yeah, I think with somebody who has the level of exposure that you have, it would be very attractive to have you on the team as a person that helps either provide opportunities for investors, or like you said, you know, from the aspect of raising capital, it really is about, you know, what can I offer to somebody? And multifamily is probably the best of any asset class in my experience. So that's probably why you're interested in it. And when you can share these opportunities with people that may not have access to it, that their
Right.
whole world is you know, investing into an insurance policy, or
Right.
you know, what their 401k is doing at you know, at work. And or in some cases people have 401ks from their previous work that are just still sitting there with, you know, completely out of mind. Nobody even knows what's happening to them. And when they find out, hey, Yonah, you're connected with all these people and this money is just sitting here doing nothing, how can I learn about what you're doing? And then boom, all of a sudden you create a connection. And if you can be a part of the group that does that, I would say that there's probably a lot of people that have you on the radar saying, yeah, let's get Yonah on our team, not only as a cost seg expert, but also as a part of our actual syndication group. So that would be fun. Hopefully that works out.
Yeah.
What is the best way you for people to contact you? Are you mostly on LinkedIn? Do you provide your phone number to people? How do people get a hold of
Sure. Yeah. In fact, my phone number and email is right on the top of my LinkedIn profile. And I really suggest that everyone do that because, you know, you want people, or if you do want people to be able to contact you, then you should make it easy for them to contact you. So I'll not only tell you that, but I'll give you my phone number and email right now so that if you do want to contact for a free estimate on any property, please feel free. My direct number is 732-298-9002. And the email is yweiss, the first letter of my first name, last name, WEISS at madisonspecs.com. But LinkedIn is really, honestly, the best place to reach out to me.
Yonah, where are you located at?
So we're based in Lakewood, New Jersey. We're a national company, but our main headquarters is there. We have offices in Dallas, in Houston, Cleveland, and engineers stationed throughout the country so we can access, you know, all properties.
So for our deals in Tucson or somebody else's deals in Kentucky or somebody else's in Florida, you have somebody, some representative close by that can come and do the segregation study, yes?
Yeah, we have an in-house team of 16 engineers. So they're not in every state, but they're traveling all the time. And like I said, last year we did over 2,000 studies. So this year we're, you know, on par to surpass that. So literally, you know, if you think about it, we have our engineers are on the road all the time, just crisscrossing the country to get to everywhere.
And then does it make sense to do cost segregation from your company standpoint on any and every property, or does it have to be a certain size before it makes sense?
It's
At what point?
usually, yeah, it's usually a value. Not necessarily, people ask me, how many units does it make sense to do it on? And there's not really an answer to that because it's more about the purchase price. What's the value? What's the basis? So
Okay.
my usual rule of thumb is over $1 million purchase. It's like a no-brainer. And you can see that in the numbers. It's just like the cost that's involved is, you know, marginal compared to what the tax savings are. Under $500,000, most of the time, it doesn't make sense. Maybe some cases it will, but in that middle range, $500,000 to $1 million, it can certainly be beneficial. But obviously, any property greater than that is just like a no-brainer.
Very cool, man. Well, it's been so good having you on the show. I can't wait to watch your progression and see which direction you go. I love seeing your posts and I do see your interaction quite a bit. So I'll take that advice and then start applying it myself. I think that's fantastic. So once again, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Awesome. Ruben, I appreciate you and having me on your show. And I wish you tremendous success in your business and in the podcast, just getting bigger and bigger and having amazing guests.
Cool, man. Well, next time we'll dive into some other things because I do want to find out more about your background and what you've been, like the things, your philosophies and the things that you have been taught. I'm always fascinated by that. And the capital raising aspect is important. But once we get some of that covered, then we can dive into everything else. So we'll definitely welcome you back with open arms if you're willing to come back.
Awesome. Thank you for the invitation. And yeah, look forward to it. Thank you.
Cool, man. All right. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Awesome.